Welcome, everyone. I want to thank you for coming to our Charter Schools Differentiated Assistance preview of our Pathway of Support. This meeting is dedicated in order to support all of our charter schools in terms of looking at what's the next steps for differentiated assistance and what that looks like. So as we begin, I would first like to introduce our team. Brought to you by Los Angeles County Office of Education, our Accountability Support and Monitoring Team, led by Dina Wilson. We also have our Center for District Capacity Building team. Myself, I am the project director. My name is Dr. Chanel Yancano. We have Dr. Kelly Castillo. We have Dr. Sunghil Kino. We have Mr. Shin Park and also Dr. Patty Poppy. Our next team members I would like to introduce to you is our LCAP state and federal programs led by Adrian Balcazar, the project director. Our coordinators, Deborah Cano, Helen Choi, Augustine Garcia, Rachel Garcia, Jeannie Keith, and Anita Lomali. And of course, our accountability and data literacy team led by project director, Evan Bartelheim, and our coordinator, Dr. Hillary Wiseman. So today, we'll be focusing on our journey. We want to make sure that we have a discussion on what is the actual system of support, what is differentiated assistance, and how do we determine the eligibility of differentiated assistance, overall and direct supports to our charters. We also would like to review our California dashboard indicators and how does that shape our differentiated assistance supports. We'll be looking at charter school DA eligibility for the 2023-2024 and how that looks and shapes our LCAP. And of course, we want to make sure that you are supported all the way through. We want to ensure that you have all the information that you need on what's next for our charter schools and how do we look at that pathway of support and how does LACO provide those pathways of supports to our charter schools directly. Before we begin also, we want to do some quick housekeeping. So right now we are in a webinar, but we want to ensure that everyone has access to all the information. So in the chat, you will have information in terms of what are the resources that we provide so you can go through all the information and take this back to your teams so you can engage in conversation. So we'll be adding in the chat live binder. So you'll have a mapped out support process for you and you can connect with all of us in terms of our resources and next steps. And also we have a Q&A for you to be able to place questions that you may have, and we'll be reviewing that Q&A. Please note, we'll be answering that Q&A live, and that Q&A will be accessible into our live binder as well. If you have any direct questions to any of our panelists, please feel free, you can write that in the chat and we can see that and we'll be answering those questions as well. If we're unable to answer the questions within the webinar, you can also put your email into the chat function and we can email you directly. Or again, you can ensure that you look at our Q&A section and we can see that live Q&A section in the chat. So we hope that you guys enjoy and we can't wait to continue the support process with you as we move forward.
Right. Well, good afternoon and welcome. We're very excited to be here with our charter LEAs to share more about California's system of support and specifically how LACO is here to support you with all of your needs as we're trying to make wonderful experiences for all of our students across the county. Differentiated assistance, or the system of support, is not new to us, and we're excited to expand it to serving our charter schools. As you can see, the local LEAs, or you, are at the center of what we like to call the egg here, but really it's looking at that LEAs, you're there, you're with the students, and that's where the work happens. And the goal of the system of support is really to envelop our LEAs with multitudes of support. But number one first level of support is that what you receive from your county offices of education. So as you know, we provide supports throughout, whether it's technical assistance that we'll talk a little bit about later. Many of you have participated in many of the activities that we have available. Outside of that, though, we can see that not just our local agencies, but our state has also organized itself around supports for you and for your students. And really what you're looking at is our county offices are then organized into 7 geographical lead agencies. And where Los Angeles County, we work with 5 other county offices. From Kern County is our lead. We also work with Ventura, Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo, and Fresno, I don't want to forget them, in this group, where we're really working on building our capacity and finding more resources to then support you. The state has also developed a system where we have resource leads and initiatives, and you can see listed on the side. In addition to the supports we provide, we have key agencies, the California Collaborative for Excellence in Education, or the CCEE, is part of the organization of these agencies, but they all provide different expertise, and part of our role is to help connect our LEAs to the resources and initiatives that are identified as a need through your dashboard. So we'll talk a little bit about the levels of support. So we have level 1 support, in which all of our LEAs, including our charter schools, have been involved in all along. So this could be technical assistance that we may be providing to you. I know many participate and learn about what's required through state and federal programs, even what is required in the testing system and how to understand TOMS and some of those basic technical assistance. But we provide a wide variety of supports through curriculum and instruction, and as well as student support services that are available to everyone as level 1 supports. Next comes level 2, and that's differentiated assistance, or you will see it referenced in legislation as technical assistance, but everyone refers to it as differentiated assistance. And that's where the county offices are set and ready to provide additional layer of support to those schools that are identified as eligible, or those LEAs that are identified as eligible. And you'll hear more about the specific eligibility criteria in just a moment. And then there's also a level 3 of intensive intervention. And that's, ways down the road for all of us here. And it only is for those who have persistent performance shortcomings over a period of multiple years, where other supports have not been proven successful. But we know that with our supports here at level 2 and your hard work that you do, that, level 3 may come down the road, and we'll get to that when we get there if we have to. So that's a basic understanding of the 3 levels of support that's available through California. The goal for support is to really assist all of you and your staff in really building your capacity to really sustain those efforts and implementation. And when you're addressing your dashboard, or even your local indicators and those student needs, that we want to be here to ensure that we're providing you with the resources and support so that you can meet the needs of your diverse student body.
What is differentiated assistance? Differentiated assistance, or DA, is targeted technical assistance under California's public school accountability system as part of the LCFF legislation. Now, the purpose of DA is to assist LEAs in addressing the underlying causes that led to low student outcomes, at the same time strengthening the LEA's overall ability to evaluate the effectiveness of strategies and programs and making necessary adjustments for improvement. Differentiated assistance is not, I repeat, it is not a status or a label that LEAs just enter and exit, but it is support based on continuous improvement. This level of support is part of a continuous improvement journey. Now, what does that mean? It means that we start by seeking to understand the problem and the system that produces that problem. We analyze data and use root cause analysis tools such as fishbone and empathy interviews to get to the underlying causes. We focus our collective efforts using aim statements and driver diagrams. We generate change ideas by considering evidence-based practices. We test our change idea using PDSA cycles, plan, do, study, act, to determine which ones resulted in an improvement. And we spread and scale to continue the work in achieving our aim.
So how does an LEA or County Office of Education become eligible for differentiated assistance? All LEAs and County Offices of Education are eligible for differentiated assistance based on performance criteria set by the State Board of Education. Current criteria are based on performance within the local control funding formula's 8 state priorities, 10 for County Offices of Education, measured through both state indicators and local indicators reported annually in the California School Dashboard. Charter schools are required to meet criteria for 2 years to be eligible for differentiated assistance supports, while LEAs and County Offices of Education are required to meet the criteria for 1 year. So here's a breakdown of state and local indicators color-coded according to the key that you see on the top right-hand corner. Please note that only state indicators are reported out by student group. Note also that the state indicator, College and Career Readiness, which was not included last year, has returned this year. Here's the performance criteria set by the State Board of Education. As you can see, performance determined by state indicators are color-coded white for priorities 4, pupil achievement, 5, pupil engagement, and 8, outcomes to a broad course of study. Performance determined by local indicators color-coded in dark orange are priorities 1, basic services and conditions, 2, implementation of state standards, 3, parent and family engagement, and 7, access to a broad course of study. Performance determined by either state or local indicators color-coded in light orange is priority 6, school climate. Please note again that the college and career indicator will be used for priority 8, outcomes to a broad course of study, and is based on status only, very low status. Since this indicator was not reported in 2022, a change cannot be determined in 2023. For 2023, an LEA or County Office of Education can become eligible using one of 3 methods. The first method relies on state indicators only. An LEA or County Office of Education is eligible if at least 1 student group meets the criteria in at least 2 priority areas. Method 2 relies on local indicators only. If an LEA or County Office of Education has not met for 2 or more years in at least 2 priority areas, they are eligible. Method 3 relies on a combination of state and local indicators. If the LEA or County Office of Education has 1 or more student groups that meet the criteria in 1 priority area and has not met for 2 or more years on only 1 local indicator in a different priority area, they are eligible.
Within the broader topic of DA eligibility, we also have eligibility requirements that are specific to charter schools. charter schools will again be eligible for differentiated assistance, beginning with the release of the 2023 California dashboard. The criteria for this eligibility is based on the same criteria as that for districts and county offices. The difference, however, is that charter schools must meet these criteria for 2 consecutive years in order to be eligible for differentiated assistance. The criteria for differentiated assistance following the release of the 2022 California dashboard included only state indicators. This means that only method 1 was used to determine eligibility at that time. When the 2023 California dashboard is released, eligibility criteria will include qualifying data from at least one of the 3 methods. Method 1, state indicators only. This method was the sole determinant for DA eligibility in 2022 and will serve as one of the possible methods to establish eligibility in 2023. Under method 1, at least one student group, which may include but is not limited to the category all students, must meet the criteria in at least 2 priority areas to be eligible for DA. An example of this eligibility would be a California dashboard showing Hispanic students scoring the red level for both chronic absenteeism and suspension, which covers the 2 state priority areas, 5 and 6, pupil engagement and school climate. Method 2, referred to as local indicators only, is reflected in the 2023 eligibility requirements. Under Method 2, eligible charter schools would receive the descriptor of not met for 2 or more years on a local indicator in at least 2 state priority areas. For example, areas 1 and 2, basic services or conditions and implementation of state standards. Method 3 consists of a combination of both the state indicators seen in Method 1 and the local indicators seen in Method 2. Under Method 3, an eligible charter school would have 1 or more student groups meet the state indicator criteria in 1 priority area and meet the local indicator criteria on 1 indicator in a different priority area. An example of Method 3 eligibility is a scenario in which the student group, students with disabilities, scored red for graduation rate, priority area 5, pupil engagement, and the charter school receives not met for 2 or more years in parent engagement, priority area 3. Charter schools meeting both the 2022 and the 2023 criteria will be eligible for differentiated assistance in 2023. How can you determine if your charter school will meet eligibility in 2023? The first step is to look at the state indicators only for the 2022 California dashboard. Is at least one student group at the lowest level in at least 2 priority areas? If not, the charter school in question will not be eligible for 2023 DA supports. LACO will continue to make level 1 supports available to this charter school. If yes, starting December 15th, 2023, you'll look at the 2023 California dashboard and see, does this charter school meet eligible criteria for any of the 3 methods? Does the charter school meet criteria for Method 1? If it does, this charter school will qualify for differentiated assistance in 2023. If not, determine if this charter school meets criteria under Method 2. If it does meet it, this charter school would qualify for differentiated assistance in 2023. If not, ask, does this charter school meet the criteria under Method 3? If it does, this charter school will qualify for differentiated assistance in 2023. 2022 DA eligibility paired with a yes response to at least one of the 3 methods will result in eligibility for 2023 differentiated assistance. If no methods are met, the charter school in question will not be eligible for differentiated assistance in 2023. 2022 DA eligibility paired with a no response to all three methods will not result in eligibility for 2023 differentiated assistance. When will eligibility be released, and how long will any potential supports be available? Looking at this timeline, we see both the previous school year, 22-23, and the current school year, 23-24. The blue star shows where we are today, a portion of the way into this school year. On December 15th of 2022, the 2022 California dashboard was released. If a charter school met eligibility under state indicators only, year one of review would be initiated. Very soon, we will come to December 15th, 2023. At this time, our 2023 California dashboard will be released. If this same charter school meets eligibility under any of the three methods, they will have met the criteria for 2 consecutive years, and they will be eligible for at least 1 year of differentiated assistance. In December of 2024, after one dashboard to dashboard cycle, next steps will be determined based on the 2024 differentiated assistance criteria. In addition to differentiated assistance, you may be aware of ESSA CSI and ATSI. Comprehensive Support and Improvement, CSI, and Additional Targeted Support and Improvement, ATSI, fall under the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA. If your charter school is eligible for either of these support programs, you will receive notification in December for DA and earlier in the calendar year for ESSA CSI or ATSI. While both programs provide support, DA focuses at the LEA level and CSI supports at the school site level, with ATSI focusing on student groups. You may ask, is it possible for an LEA to qualify for both DA and ESSA support? Yes, it is possible. So does qualifying for one automatically result in eligibility for the other? No, not necessarily. Why is that? DA and ESSA have different qualifying criteria. Therefore, LEAs may qualify for neither, for one, or for both. While our focus today is on differentiated assistance, at the end of today's presentation, we'll be sharing resources to support your next steps with regard to both DA and ESSA.
Thank you, Kelly. Hello, my name is Evan Bartelheim, and I am the Project Director for Accountability and Data Literacy, and I'm joined by my colleague, Dr. Hillary Weissman. In this section, we're going to provide a better understanding of the data that informs the dashboard to help ground our charter school administrators who are responsible for accountability. We hope that this information will help inform your understanding as you access the dashboard previews that the state intends to start providing in mid-November. And it will also provide you some understanding of the way LACO incorporates data from the dashboard as part of the DA process. So before we go too deep into the details, I thought we'd take a step back to discuss some of the fundamental concepts guiding the development of the dashboard. First of all, it's important to understand that the dashboard actually fulfills a federal requirement that's outlined in the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA, and every state is actually required to have a dashboard. This isn't unique to California. California's dashboard, however, is guided by a set of 11 principles, and I've condensed them here for the sake of space, but it's important to go through just a few of the ones I'd like to highlight that are relevant to our discussion. One principle is the dashboard should reflect the state's commitment to a well-rounded, well-supported education, while also making space for what is valued locally. Hence, you have the state indicators, which are predetermined, as well as the local indicators, which are guided by both local data and then the local self-reflection process. Another principle is that there's an emphasis on equity, which is revealed through the reporting out opportunity of performance gaps among student groups. And this is done primarily through the equity report that's available for each of the state indicators, but there's additional data sources, which we'll point out later, that'll help you look at the gaps that may exist between student groups, the all students or between each student group. Additionally, the dashboard is unique in that it places an equal emphasis, or tries to place an equal emphasis between high performance and growth. So this year that's going to be reflected as through the, once again, we have colors reflected in status and growth. And that will be applied to all but one of the indicators, the college and career indicators, just reappearing for the first time on the dashboard. It has status only. And then finally, the dashboard is subject to continuous revision and improvement. So as an example, the English Learner Progress Indicator, which we're seeing in all its glory this year, for the first time, we have all 3 years worth of data. That actually is a significant change from the way it first appeared on the dashboard back in 2018. That's undergone revisions based on both feedback from the federal government, from the Department of Education, as well as local interest groups and technical design group and other entities that feed information to the CDE. As has been previously noted, there are 11 indicators that are relevant to you. There are 2 local indicators that are of use only to county offices. But just to quickly go over where that data comes from, where those come from, the 6 state indicators are generated by the California Department of Ed, and they use data that's collected statewide from LEAs using CalPADS, as well as some outside vendors such as the Educational Testing Service and the College Board. And the local indicators, as noted, are generated locally. So you using your own local data to inform your self-reflection tool, and then those are uploaded, and they were uploaded in September. Hopefully got those uploaded to the dashboard. The frequency of the dashboard is annual, of course, and we do expect it by December 15th. It's in statute. However, per Senate Bill 114, the future dashboard releases are going to be moving up in the next 3 years. Next year will be December 1st, the following year, November 15th, and then ultimately landing in October 15th to coincide with the release of the State Summative Assessment results. So that's going to be a significant shift, both in the ability to look at the data earlier, but also in the collection and submission of the data from LEAs. So just to dive into kind of an overview of the data on the dashboard, just looking at this table here, you can see you've got the state indicators to the left. We're only going to talk about the state indicators. And then in the middle column is the data that's used for the status, and then the data that's used for the change. Okay, so the first, we'll just go row by row just quickly. The academic indicator, which is looking at the summative assessments for Smarter Balance, as well as the California alternate assessment. These are collected from ETS, the state's test vendor, and they look at a distance from standard as opposed to percentage median or exceeding standard. And this really takes into account all your learners, so you're both your highest achieving and your students who are struggling the greatest. They're all incorporated into that calculation. And so the change then becomes, well, your distance from standard, and is calculated for each student group, as well as for each individual school. And that's calculated in 2022, and then the difference between 2023 and 22 is your difference. Chronic absenteeism, it's only a K-8 indicator. I think it's important to note. And that's data that's pulled from CalPADS, again, looking at the 23 to 22. This was a big issue last year for a lot of LEAs when we had status only. We know we had a lot of chronic absenteeism due to COVID and protocols related to COVID. And we've seen the initial chronic absenteeism data has been actually released, not the dashboard version, but the K-12 data has been released. And that's actually shown in some cases that it actually didn't go down. So that might be something of interest to you. And as I noted, you'll have a preview of the data for the dashboard prior to the ultimate release. So it'd be a good thing to look at for the individual student groups, which you may or may not know whether they went up or down and what their status is. That's a good one probably to begin developing some language to communicate to your school community. Next, my favorite, the college and career indicator, back on the dashboard this year. This is a very complicated, it's an indicator. It applies only to grades 9 through 12 or any school that has students who graduate. It actually collects data from a number of sources. CalPADS, it uses the CASP data from 11th grade, so ETS also there. It collects AP exam information from the College Board and IB exam information from the International Baccalaureate Group. So it's pulling all of this stuff together, and it's looking at a 4-year cohort data. So students going back, up to 4 years when they graduate, and 5 years actually, because it uses a 4 and 5 year grad rate. So pretty complicated measure, and it may take a little bit of time to unpack it. This will be the first time we've seen it since 2019. So it'll be an interesting reinvestigating it as far as looking at the data to understand what you might be able to do differently in future years if this happens to be a point of challenge for some of your student groups. As I mentioned, the English Learner Progress Indicator will be fully achieved this year with all 3 years worth of data. It's a bit unique among the indicators because it's not just looking at the change from 1 year to the next, it's looking at the change of the change. So it's using 3 years worth of data. So last year we had the status, which was the difference between the 2021-22, the 2020 and 21 summative assessment data and the 2021-22 summative assessment. Now we're going to look at the difference between the change between 21-22, 22-23 and the prior. So pretty complex. We get that data from ETS also. So the grad rate is a combined grad rate, 4 and 5 year graduation rate. This is data pulled from CalPADS, it's cohort data. There may be a few schools that were dashboard alternative schools among our charter schools. However, note that the Department of Education rejected a waiver that was submitted by the CDE to maintain a DOS school, a different methodology for calculating graduation rate. It was a 1 year graduation rate. The Fed said we couldn't do that. So now all schools receive the 4 and 5 year combined graduation rate on the dashboard. However, the DOS graduation rate is reported out separately. It just isn't used for accountability purposes, so it doesn't affect identification for differentiated assistance eligibility. Finally, the suspension rate. Again, this is data that's pulled from CalPADS. We'll get into the individual metrics a little bit more and what's used for the calculations as we go along. So you would think.
Alrighty, so we are going to continue and spend the next few slides talking about performance levels and colors. And to help parents and educators identify strengths and areas for improvement, California reports on how districts, schools, including alternative schools, and student groups are performing across the state and local measures. For state measures, performance is based on 2 factors, as you can see on this slide. Status, which is the current year's resulting range from very high to very low, and change, the bottom box there, which is whether the results improved from the prior year and are identified by levels ranging from increase significantly to decline significantly. As we move on, performance on state measures uses comparative statewide data. As you can see on the top image on this slide, our 2023 dashboard will be returning to color. Okay, so bye-bye to the 2022 purple cell phone bars that previously only captured status, and hello to status and change, which will no doubt give us all colorful dashboards. And as a reminder, a gauge indicator that displays colors, gauge indicators display colors ranging from the lowest performance of red to the highest performance, which is blue. In cases where there are fewer than 30 students in any year, a grayed out color dial with the words no performance color will be in place of the traditional color dial. And Evan will be speaking to that more specifically on the next slide or so. That addresses smaller populations. But if we take a look at the second image at the bottom of this slide with the red circle around it, there are 5 local performance indicators that are also incorporated into the dashboard. And those local indicators are based on a set of performance standards being met and then receiving the appropriate performance rating. For the performance standards, the State Board of Education has approved the performance standards for each of the local indicators, which include annual meeting its progress, reporting results as part of a non-consent item at the same public meeting at which the LCAP is adopted on or before July 1st, and reporting results through the dashboard using the State Board of Education adopted self-reflection tool for each local indicator. For each of these local indicators, there are a possibility of 3 different performance ratings on the dashboard. An LEA that meets all 3 of the State Board of Education approved performance standards for a local indicator will receive a performance rating of met, for that local indicator in the dashboard. An LEA that does not meet all three of the State Board of Education approved performance standards for the local indicator will receive a performance rating of not met. LEAs that do not meet all three of the State Board of Education approved performance standards for a local indicator for 2 or more consecutive years will receive a performance rating of not met for 2 or more years for that local indicator in the dashboard. And as I said, let's learn a little bit more about some small populations with Evan.
Thanks, Hillary. So it's important to note that in order to receive a color and from the corresponding performance level for any given indicator, a charter school must have a minimum number of students in the denominator of that indicator's calculation. And on the dashboard, the rules for schools rather than for districts are applied to charters. So that's a good thing. So to receive a color for all students or for any student group, a school must have had 30 students in the denominator in both the current year and the prior year. And each indicator does use a slightly different rule for determining what the denominator is. Probably not going to go too deep on that here, but we have an upcoming webinar we'll plug later where you can find out the nitty-gritty of those rules. So what you'll see though, if you don't have 30 or more, and this applies to most importantly homeless and foster youth, because at the district level, only at a school district, only 15 students are required to generate an indicator for both homeless and foster youth. However, for a charter school, you need to have 30 for both of those student groups. So it's consistent across all student groups. When a school has a student group with between 11 and 29 students, you don't get nothing. You actually get a baseball card, right? So you see status, and it'll be reported out as status. There will be no color. It's not used for accountability purposes. And for the college and career indicator, it'll be the same thing. If you only had between 11 and 29 students within a student group, you'll receive a status. You'll receive no reflection. There will be no bars on your cell phone, but it would show the data. It would show the percentage of that particular status. So that's important to know. And then if there's a student group smaller than 11, no data is revealed. That's for the purposes of privacy. And because small student populations, of course, are more susceptible to large swings from year to year, the state has approved for some of the indicators what's called the 3x5 grid, and it's applied when the denominator of a school or the student group is less than 150. And we'll illustrate this and explain it further in a couple of slides. But first, we'll look at the traditional versus the balanced grid. So the 5x5, and you'll see these when you drill into the data a little bit. So the key components, I just want to make a note of the difference. First of all, the traditional 5x5 that you see on the left here, it's really intended to kind of weight status and change equally. And it's used only for, it's used primarily for the graduation rate, the chronic absenteeism, suspension rate, and the English learner progress indicator on the 2023 dashboard. It does attempt to address, there is potentially some volatility within small groups. And you'll note, particularly if you had a high status as your performance level, you could have as many as 4 different colors, right? So you could have big changes. If you maintained your status from the prior year, you'd be green, but you could have increased significantly to blue, you could have declined to yellow, or declined significantly to orange. So if you had a small student group, potentially that could result in some big changes, and we'll get to when the 3x5 is, or the 3x5 is applied. Now on the right, you see the balance, and the balance effectively kind of neutralizes those big swings by offering only the potential for 2 different colors, up to 2 different colors per line. This is only used on the academic indicator. The state board approved this a few years ago, but it only approved it for the academic indicator because they noted that there were bigger swings typically with small groups on the academic indicator. And it's really more forgiving for small groups that can have those bigger results. But don't fret if you have small groups, because you're, of course, a charter school, so you're likely to have those small groups. There is the 3x5, which I'll explain on the next slide. So the 3x5 grid, as I mentioned, it's applied to graduation, suspension, chronic absenteeism, and the college and career indicator. And it really looks at the denominator, the n size being 150 or smaller. Now, the application of the 3x5 is applied kind of behind the scenes. You're not going to notice. So what it basically does is it eliminates the color scheme with the increased or decreased significantly columns, right? So whatever your status is, so if you recall, and the status was low and you received a decrease significantly, that would put you in the red, typically to the far left. But in this case, if you have fewer than 150 students, they apply this 3x5 kind of behind the scenes, and you wouldn't be subject to that red. You'd only receive an orange. An orange would appear on the front of the dashboard. It wouldn't go into any greater depth. So if you're looking at your dashboard on an indicator and you go, well, wait, shouldn't that have been a decline significantly? Wouldn't that put me in red? You may want to look at what was your denominator, and if it was less than 150, in all likelihood, they applied the 3x5. In the background, there is a report you can get to, which will show you if the 3x5 was applied, but it's not going to be apparent to anybody. So this does reduce the likelihood if you're going to have a year-to-year big swings in colors, and it's really important for schools, especially now charter schools being considered for eligibility. You won't have those big swings based on the performance of just a few students.
So let's take a look at the chronic absenteeism indicator. As we can see, it represents the percentage of students who are chronically absent, which is defined as being absent for 10% or more of the instructional days which they are enrolled to attend, and is reported for students in kindergarten through 8th grade. For this indicator, excused and unexcused absences, in addition to out-of-school suspensions, are included in the calculations. Also, it's important to note that most of the state indicators, the desired outcome is to have a high percentage of performance in the current year. However, for the chronic absenteeism and for the suspension indicator, which I'll go over next, the desired outcome is reversed, and the goal is to achieve a low chronic absenteeism rate. As we look at the suspension rate indicator, this indicator shows a percentage who have an aggregate suspension length of at least one full day in kindergarten through 12th grade. Similarly, as I said to chronic absenteeism, the desired outcome for the suspension rate is also reversed, and the goal is to achieve a low suspension rate.
Sorry. So the English language progress indicator, again, coming on as full glory. This makes this indicator measures the progress of your English learners from year to year. It's like I said earlier, the LP is distinguished from other measures because it's the only indicator that measures progress towards proficiency rather than the end goal of proficiency itself. So hence you have that change over time, and the change is that difference between year to year. So it's really a measure of your progress. It's a fascinating measure, and they just approved the change scores just recently at the state board. So this year will be the first time we get to see the distribution of schools. So the LP status is determined by looking at the growth between 2 years. And what's interesting is that the LPAC itself, the summative assessment, has only 4 levels, but the LP has 6 levels. So they subdivide the second and third level of the LPAC to create 6 levels. And that information, again, is kind of buried. You'll see it on the dashboard as a measure, but if you really want to look at the individual levels, you'll have to dig into the dashboard technical guides. So a student will have made growth if they advance between those 6 levels, or if they're at the highest level, level 4, and maintain that status from 1 year and the next. And so the difference between 2 years would be the percentage of students who've made that progress or maintained, and then compared to the prior year. So the interesting thing about this year, one big change I'd like to note with regards to the LP is that last year, if you didn't reach 95% participation rate on the LPAC, and this is for all students who are eligible, who are at your LEA, then you were subjected to a participation rate penalty, because there is a requirement in federal legislation that 95% of all students who are eligible to take the summative assessments must take that assessment. The LPAC is technically required for 100% of students under Title III, but for the purpose of the dashboard, they apply the 95% rule. Previously, you would be assigned an automatic status of low if you didn't reach that 95% participation rate, but they changed the rules this year, and the participation rate that will be applied is more akin to what we see with the academic indicator, which is relevant to the number of students who you would need to reach that 95% participation rate. We're going to talk a little bit more about the participation rate in a couple of slides, but just know it's changed. So the punishment now will fit the crime. If you fell 1 or 2 students below median participation rate, it wouldn't necessarily be an automatic assignment to a low. It would affect you in a similar way to the academic indicator, where those individual students would be assigned a lowest scale score. And so the academic indicator is, as I mentioned earlier, uses that distance from standard. And that's the distance between the student's score and then the standard met achievement level for the grade level that the student is in. And they do calculate distance from standard for both the Smarter Balanced and the California alternate assessments within ELA math. Although CAST you could calculate distance from standard for the science test. Science test is not currently included on the dashboard. So it's available within the data files, but you don't necessarily, it's not incorporated in the dashboard, so it doesn't apply toward your eligibility for differentiated assistance. So there are some students, and this is an important note, that not all students are included in the calculation for the dashboard. So you may have seen recently they released the CASP, the Smarter Balanced Summative Assessments for ELA and Math. However, for the dashboard, it's slightly different. Only the students who've had continuous enrollment from Census Day in the fall, which is the first Wednesday in October, until first logging in to the Smarter Balanced Assessment, those are the only students who are incorporated. And they also have to have no gaps of 30 days or more. Those are the only students who are included in the denominator for calculating this. Students who don't meet that criteria are not included in the numerator or the denominator. Also, any English learners who are new to the country, so they've been here for less than a year, they can take the test, but they would be excluded from the calculation. And any students who did not take the test and had a medical emergency code assigned to them during the assessment. So the calculation for DFS, distance from standard, is applied for the LEA. In your case, as a charter school, you are the LEA, as well as each individual student group, and that's where they get the calculation. Note, we're going to talk about in just a second, but the participation rate does affect the distance from standard. I'm going to go into that. You have to meet that 95% participation rate, and it can have a big impact. So I'll talk about that on the next slide. So the dreaded participation rate. So if you don't meet, if a student group or a school doesn't meet the 95% participation rate, the state applies a penalty in the form of a lowest obtainable scale score, or a loss. And that penalty is assigned to each student who would be needed to bring that participation rate up to 95%. So basically they throw in a numerator with a value of the lowest distance from standard. And those are predetermined. The distance from standard for ELA is -279, and for math is -247. So those are fixed. It doesn't vary by the grade level. So there are some considerations. It's not 100%. There is a little grace period applied to the beginning and end of the test window. So if a student had left your LEA before you could test them within the first 14 days, they aren't held against you for participation rate purposes. Also, if a student arrived at your LEA at the very end with 14 days to go, you're not held accountable for those students. But otherwise, if it was a student who's with you through the whole time and you weren't able to test them or to complete the testing, the loss could be applied if you didn't reach that 95% participation rate, and it applied to every student group. So you could have a smaller student group, and those lowest obtainable scale scores could have a big impact. We saw it last year on a number of our districts.
So if we look at the graduation rate indicator, you can see that this indicator is defined by the percentage of high school students who receive a traditional diploma in the 12th grade. The graduation rate indicator reports students who graduate within either 4 or 5 years, as we previously stated. One important note is that our dashboard, our alternative schools, status schools, DOS schools, are no longer calculated separately. As we move on and look at the college career indicator, this indicator, as we said, is only going to show up in status form this year, but it represents the percentage of high school graduates who are prepared for college and or career. Likewise, it's also important to remember that the college career indicator was designed to ensure that students have access to a broad course of study. In this indicator, there are several combinations in which students can achieve preparedness. And I feel like there will be a ever evolving and growing chart, which we'll add to some resources later. But we want to note that the, as I said before, the CCNI is only going to be reported as status only for the 2023 year.
So a few best practices at how to look at your data, and I mentioned this earlier, that there are some reports you would want to look at. So of course, the first place to look is this dashboard equity report, where you first see your distribution of student performance. And that's one of the things we definitely look at for the DA process, right? So any student group, and this is to say, not necessarily just the students who are eligible, who made you eligible, but are there trends, right? And so you can see in this example here from a school's suspension rate, you see that even though they are green overall, they did have at least one student group that was orange, right? So it may be a consideration as far as the conversations that take place. You know, is it within a specific area, in this case, suspension? So maybe there are certain factors that might be addressed through root cause analysis. But additionally, I think the additional reports feature that appears, and it's a button, and I've got it highlighted there. When you get the preview, you want to click the view additional reports, and one of the examples we use a lot here is the student group report. And I had to pull this from 2019 because we haven't produced the dashboard with colors since then. But as you can see, this really lays it out. And we often will look at this and say, well, is this a student group, a standalone, or is this part of a bigger trend, right? So if you have student groups that are eligible, is it just the student group that's really a standout, or is it a significant area? So in this example, you can see that you have a lot of red in certain indicators and not as many in others, right? So this is an example of one of the reports that we use. You can also pull up the participation rate report if you thought, geez, do we meet our participation rate? Is that being applied? Is there a lowest obtainable scale scores being assigned to a student group that's affecting our overall distance from standard and our performance on the dashboard? It's a good way to note that, because it's something you could kind of low-hanging fruit that you might be able to address in future years, just for looking at how your administration of summative assessments went.
As we get closer to the December 15th, 2023 dashboard release, the CDE has and will continue to provide a plethora of support in the form of flyers, on-demand sessions, and communication resources that will be short and accessible at any time within their dashboard communications toolkit. I know that's being populated currently, and every day it feels like there's another PDF being released. Another great resources you can see up here is, Evan spoke to them at the very beginning, are the dashboard principles, which I think provide foundational and principles around the dashboard, which can serve as a great entry point when you're engaging in conversations with educational partners. There's also included here a registration link to several dashboard Q&A sessions the CDE will be hosting in the near future. And lastly, for those of you or us who want to nerd out and or are brushing up on your CalPADian language, we've also included the most recent handbook linking CalPADs to the dashboard.
So we did have one question that was in the Q&A, and I'm wondering if our presentation driver could back up to the participation rate slide. So the question is, are there exact cutoff dates for the participation rates, either for early departures or late arrivals? And so, yeah, I kind of skimmed over this. So you had it just a second ago. Go forward one. Thank you. So your individual LEA, the clock starts ticking for those grace periods, not when your official test window opens, but rather when the first student at the school takes the test. And so this is really important. It's hopefully your assessment coordinator has consulted and everybody's on the same page, to establish when to open the testing window. Because sometimes if you open the test window real really early, a student may inadvertently launch that summative assessment. Maybe they're supposed to be taking an interim assessment. They inadvertently launch the summative assessment. Even if it's inadvertent, that starts the clock ticking for that grace period. So that's and that's going to depend on each individual school for the determination of the window for participation rate. And then the ending period is determined by the end of your testing window, which is established in the TOM system at the beginning of the year. Well, it's just around this part of the year. And so that's kind of predetermined by the LEA. You can't really change it without submitting a request to the folks at ETS. But usually it's used, a lot of schools use it to capture all their students. You don't want to miss those students who maybe missed a part of the test, so keep the window open. But it's going to depend on your window, and then also that first test when it was taken. So that was all the questions we had. So I don't see no others. Move forward.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Adrienne Balcazar in the LCAP Federal and State Programs Unit. And, you know, where we are right now is we are waiting for the new 24 to 27 3-year cycle template to be state board approved. And that should happen on November 8th. And at that time, then we will have a new template. But what we do know today is the ed code that is in place. And so when we wait for the template, that will really tell us how it's going to be translated. And so, but what we do know is the law. So there are changes for charter schools. And so what we do know is that in Ed Code 52064, if you click on that particular link and you scroll down to B2 and B9, you will find the specific instructions that talk about the actions that have to be included in your LCAP that explain how you're going to achieve the goals, pertaining to DA. And then also in the plan summary, if you're familiar with being an LCAP writer, in the plan summary, you will have to include a summary of the work that's taking place as part of the technical assistance. So these two changes will need to be included for you that are identified to be eligible for DA. And so this will be reflected in your LCAP. Another change as well that we know is the specific support. And so we do know that for the first time since 2019 that charter schools are now eligible for DA. There was kind of a hold before, and now you're here. And so the support provider for charter schools will be us, the County Office of Education for county, which the school is located in. Previously, the provider was the charter school authorizer. So this is a change from previous differentiated assistance. And then for anyone here that is part of a COE authorized charter school, just know that your support will be provided by the geographic lead. And so again, these are some changes that are taking place. There is the Ed Code that also provides additional technical assistance, the requirements for charter schools specifically. And then our unit will be providing the technical support and our workshops, and they'll probably, they're to be determined. Again, we're waiting upon CDE's approval of the template. Most likely we'll be sending out information for workshops to take place in January and February. And but right now we do know that CDE has provided an online and 8 modules that will go over the LCAP. So if you're new to LCAP, there will be a specific module that will address, I'm sure, the DA. And then we will share that information towards the latter part of today's presentation. So thank you.
Thank you so much, team. All of our panelists that have discussed and talked about their areas of expertise in order to support our charter schools in this DA process. We received some questions within our some of our participants asking, what happens if we are eligible for differentiated assistance and ESSA supports? What does that look like? Are we able to combine some of the supports? And what is a pathway in order for us to get on the right track? Well, guess what? LACO's here to help and support you all the way through. So I know one of our panelists discussed if you want to nerd out, this is our time to nerd out. So today we wanted to give you a preview of what it was, what all the things that we need to do and what we're looking for. Please note that we know that we provided a lot of information today. So we will have all of this recorded and our presentation available to you in our live binder. And as we speak, we're also updating our live binder based off of questions that we've had, and we're updating it with EdCode information so you have everything in a one-stop shop for you. So really trying to help and support you through this process. Please note again, we talked about all of our panelists. We will be giving out, you'll receive an official DA letter of support if you're eligible for this. If you meet the criteria of support, December 15th, that eligibility letter will go out and you'll be able to see it published to see if you're one of the charter schools that are eligible. During that time, this is where we want you to have that team time to review, to reflect, and engage together. What are those eligibilities? Are we reviewing the dashboard? Are we looking at the data that we need? And please feel free to connect with our LACO support team for any questions of support that you need in order to move everything through. Move everything through. Next, we want to make sure that you guys are ready to go. So we're going to be having a charter school DA symposium for you February 6th. So this will be going over DA 101, improvement cycles, next steps, plans of support, and we'll have our LACO team members there in order to engage and get into the work with you as we move that work forward. Also, we talked about our LCAP supports and what that next step looks like. On February 28th, that mid-year LCAP report is due for our charter. So we want to make sure that you save that date. So the LCAP mid-year report is due to make sure you guys are ready and able to submit that as needed. During that time, we are planning for you. So we talked about some improvement cycles and improvement plans. We're going to be starting our improvement cycle in order to engage all of our charter schools that are eligible for DA and ESSA eligibility. You're able to go to this particular support plan. So we'll start with the PDSA cycle plan. During that time frame, we're also going to be engaging in improvement science community of practice for all of our differentiated assistance eligible schools and ESSA eligible schools as well, in order to do, let's say, that one-stop shop of support. We'll be getting into that due cycle in April. And in May, we'll get into the study cycle. And then, of course, we have a 3-day charter focused improvement science institute for all of our charter schools to engage in June. During that time frame, you're also going to be preparing for that approved LCAP that is due July 1st. So putting that all together, and along the way, you'll have your LACO team members here to support you along the way. And then in July, we'll finish that ACT cycle for you to ensure that you guys are ready to go to find out what is that root cause analysis? What is that focus areas of support in order to engage the work, so you can pinpoint what is that piece that you guys want to focus on in terms of your eligibility and your next steps. So this is some exciting work. We want to make sure that you guys are on the road to success in order to help and support you. And please note, if you ever have any questions, please feel free to contact us along the way. While we're waiting for some of these things to happen, we have an additional things to help you as we go through. So I'm going to hand it off to my colleague, Adrienne.
Thank you. So yes, as I mentioned before, CDE will begin their webinar series, and it's a series of what they do is they break down all of the different components of the LCAP. So starting from in November 14th, they'll have the Tuesday at 2, And if you happen to see the 3 p.m., that one is Thursday at 3. And so you can see the times and the dates, and you can mark your calendars. They do ask you to register in advance. There is no charge. And so we put the link down at the bottom so you can go to that webpage and feel free to sign up for all of them. It's a great resource to understand the new template and all the legal requirements. And again, once we do have our dates scheduled for our units, workshops and support, I will be giving that to Chanel so she can email out to all of you the information, and therefore you can join us as well. So thank you.
And yeah, we have our workshop called Navigating Accountability Through the California School Dashboard coming up on November 7th. It's a Zoom webinar with which will be recorded also. We'll cover a lot of the same ground that we covered today, but we will go into much greater depth. So we're going to explore a lot of the business rules that affect the individual indicators, including things like the District of Special Education Accountability. That doesn't really apply actually to charter schools, but just there's some others that we probably helpful to understand, like suspension rate and what goes into the numerator to denominator. And most importantly, we'll give you some tools and tricks for calculating your own data. So sometimes it feels like the dashboard is just this big black box. You wait until it comes out and you're surprised or shocked by, but that doesn't have to be the case, because you can actually calculate or predict within a range of error what your dashboard performance may look like. And we're going to talk about some of the ways to do that. And hopefully, you'll have the dashboard preview coming out around that time, and you can already be preparing some documentation or some commentary to share with your staff and with your school community.
Yeah, and here's some upcoming Center for District Capacity Building opportunities. We have the Comprehensive Support and Improvement. That's a 2-day virtual training coming up in January and in February. We have the 3-day in-person California MTSS Foundations training. We have the monthly Improvement Science Community Practice. That's virtual. And the other monthly series that we have is the California MTSS Coaching and Capacity Building. And so those are monthly virtual series. And also coming up in March, we'll also be adding additional PDSA cycle support for charter schools.
And of course, we want to make sure that you're able to save the dates. So we always like to make sure that you get information from our California Charter Schools Association, along with our partnerships with Curriculum Improvement Support Committee, our CIS committee. So November 13th at 2 p.m., we will have a DA 101. So if you would like to invite some of your team members to engage in some of this work, we will have this date sent out to you via email with all the information to register once that registration opens. And of course, they also have their December 13th deep dive, the DA deep dive that will happen at 2 p.m. So that is in conjunction and with collaboration with our California Charter Schools Association and our Curriculum Improvement Support Committee, brought to you by our California County of Superintendents. So we have a lot of information and supports to provide to all of you, and we want to make sure that you feel supported along the way, and you're guided throughout this process. And please note that you're never alone in this work. So we want to say a big piece for you guys to make sure that you engage in. Don't forget to save this date. This is free. Your entire teams are invited to this. We want to make sure that you guys bring your teams and then you engage in our Charter School Symposium. This is just for charter schools. I'm going to say it again. This is just for our charter schools, because we know that you guys have specific areas of need that is not like any other. And we want to make sure that you're able to connect together and get that improvement process that is needed to move forward. So registration is going to open December 15th. We've been saying that date a lot because we want you to save the date, because that's the date we'll find out all the information is coming out. So registration will open December 15th. We will send everyone out an email of this registration and saving the date, and register your entire teams. Whoever wants to come, come. But make sure that you guys are available and ready to go to learn and to engage. So we would like to say thank you for joining us today for this webinar. And please note, if you need anything and you need to connect with us, please feel free to contact us. We are here to help and support you. We are guided by our division director, Dina Wilson. She has helped us and connected us along the way to make sure that we can support you. And that's what we're here to do. So thank you, everyone. And we will see you again soon. Thank you.